I design everything usually with the client one-on-one the day of, and we figure everything out, make sure it lays on the body appropriately. That is a very important component to make sure that it flows with the anatomy appropriately. A lot of the times it can look stupid on paper, so I'll design it here and then it'll look dumb. And then we'll play it on the body and it just lays right, you know? So like a lot of times you really have to try to print it out and make sure it lays on the body appropriately, as opposed to like trying to go by how it looks here, because this will mislead you, you know? It's not skewed, and everyone's skew is different, you know? From my own personal experience, I have a lot of friends that can design things ahead of time, but everyone is different heights, different weights, different shapes. There's so many complexities to it that it doesn't make sense to me to try to like design something that fits your average arm and then them come in and there be little inadequacies that don't line up appropriately that can, to me, be detrimental to how the piece looks. As our industry progresses forward, that's what it's going to become, is more and more customized, more and more independent, more and more about the individual. The hardest part of stenciling is making sure your stencil can stay there long enough to get enough effective information out of it to do a proper job. A lot of times what I'll do, obviously clean the area well, and then you want to make sure the skin's dry. So you'll use like an alcohol. I've seen people use witch hazel, and that'll pull the oils off the skin, and then it's just allowing your transfer cream to rub into the skin really well and then transfer it. And then I even recommend getting a towel after that and patting it dry, because there's going to be so much of that residue left over that it can also affect how the stencil stays. I worked at a shop where everyone there was doing black and gray, and they were absolute killers at it. And I had to ask myself, like, all right, how am I going to stand apart? And then I figured out I'd start doing more color, since no one in the shop was really doing color. Then I started doing flowers, because it just kind of organically became a lot of nature things. And I said, well, hell, I want to do more roses and whatnot. And people just kept coming in for it. I get the inspiration for each unique flower from my clients. Like a lot of the times, like when I'm sitting down designing with them, like we're both looking at the references that come across or the pictures that I have and saying like, oh, I really like that one, you know, or this one feels right, you know? And then on top of that, we'll print everything out and then see how it lays on the body. So there's that fluidity to it, kind of helps us have a real movement to it, because it's important that we make sure something that is floral looks organic and looks like it's growing. And as soon as you kind of lose that element to it, especially whenever you're laying it on like a moving surface like a body, it can grow stagnant, and that's definitely not what you want. So typically what I'll do, I'll use rubber bands to wrap around the grip to, first of all, keep the clip cord cover in place, and then I sort of make a makeshift hand wrap out of the paper towels, and I'll use the rubber bands to keep that grip down too. I think this is good. At least this helps it be a bit more personalized and individualized for each person's hand. So I'll make adjustments to my grip size depending on comfort. Sometimes a bigger grip feels better, you know, and this really allows you to kind of fine tune it to whatever feels the most comfortable for you. I typically line a little bit, but the line is more really to hold the stencil. Maybe if there's like some part of it that needs like a heavy amount of contrast or something to that degree, like I'll put like a touch of an edge. I use the liner more to like make things sharper. I don't really use a liner to like try to make like a baseline of lines like you see in a traditional tattoo. I use liners for a lot of my tattoo. If I'm pulling a line, it's not necessarily to make a hard line to edge. If I'm pulling a line, it's more just to make sure the stencil doesn't get wiped away and I'm holding a shape there. But like if I'm trying to make a hard edge or a sharp edge, I'm still treating it like a shading. Like I'm still really trying to slowly build it up and make sure that edge is precise. Like it's not very often I'm like trying to pull a hard line. If I was to pull a hard line, then I would run it faster. Being familiar with your colors is important. I think more important than being familiar with your colors though is seeing how it looks on the skin. Say if you're doing an area with a field of color. As all tattoo, I'll be checking my color on my reference, right? But just because it's actually the same color as it is on my reference doesn't mean that it's going to look the same in the skin. So sometimes I need to bump it up or bump it back down or something to that degree. Whenever we're tattooing, we're trying to make our darks really, really dark and our lights really, really light. And then when it heals, it kind of balances out. Your darks get lighter, your lights get darker. So you're trying to over punch it so that it meets in the middle. You're splitting hairs really, really finely. And the more passes you can do, the better those contrasts become. To make those colors pop out more, you want really good contrast. And to be sure that there's enough contrast, you kind of have to see how the colors are playing together in the area. That's why we start with our darks, so we know that that's the darkest we can go. Whenever you're starting with that area, the next plane up, if I put in yellow, but it looks like it needs to be a little bit darker, or it looks like it needs to be a little bit lighter, I can see on the skin next to my darks where it's at in retrospect, and then try to adjust from there.